Hey, welcome back, parents. I want to share with you something that one of our listeners wrote in to tell me about regarding a parenting issue that she experienced. So, what she said was that she had her son, who is 18 months old, and took him to the pediatrician for a checkup. And she remembered the pediatrician saying, "How many words is he saying?" And she said, "None." And she said, "I remember the pediatrician saying, it's probably fine. I'm sure he'll be okay." And they proceeded on with the assessment. Well, something didn't sit well with this mom. She said, "I left the appointment and I just felt like something wasn't right." And so when I was at a play date with my son's little friends, one of the moms said, "I would listen to your intuition. If you think your son should be assessed because he's not talking yet, then I would go beyond what your pediatrician said and seek out some sort of assessment to find out for sure." So she said, "I did, and it turned out he did have significant speech and language development issues. And so I got some early intervention services through the state, which were free to us. And if I would have listened to my pediatrician, he would have aged out and not been eligible for those services." So she said, "I was so grateful for that mom encouraging me to do that, and that I was willing to listen to my own intuition despite what my pediatrician said." And so to this day, he is speaking well and has really benefited from those early intervention services. So I thought, listen, if this topic is important to you, it's important to our listeners, it's important to me. So let's bring this issue to our larger parent community. So that's what we're doing on today's episode. I have a guest in studio with me, which I always enjoy to be sitting next to our guest. Um, and she is an expert in speech and language development. So, welcome to the show, Erin Honberrier.
Hi, Jordan. So happy to be here today.
Man, I'm glad to have you sitting beside me. I'm just so pumped that we could have somebody who has personal experience and expertise and has been in the field for 20 years, serving parents and families that have speech and language issues. So, Erin, you're a native of Colorado. You got your master's right up the road from University of Northern Colorado, and you are a licensed speech and language pathologist. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Awesome. So you have been working both in a clinical setting and then in the private practice setting over the last 15, 20 years, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you're also a mama, just like me and our listeners.
That's right.
So, guys, she has been married for several years and has 3 kids of her own. And she's also a homeschool mama. So you got it going on the professional side and the personal side at home.
Absolutely. It works all together, doesn't it?
It sure does. Well, tell us a little bit about this listener's experience. Is that something that is common that you have seen out in the community where you take your kid to the doctor, pediatrician says, "No problem, let's just kind of wait it out," and then you see these kids later on in your practice?
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times this happens where parents sometimes feel like they don't want to rush their kids or they are overreacting sometimes where their kid isn't doing what other kids are doing or what siblings are doing sometimes. That's kind of the typical story I hear from a lot of parents is they're not doing what their brother did or they're not doing what their sister did at a certain time. And am I overreacting? And it's from my point of view as a mom too, I think I was the exact same way. I wanted what was absolutely best for my kid. So I asked all the questions to the pediatrician, and I think that's a great source. I think that's a great place to start.
Yes.
Is just this is not foreign to the pediatrician at all. They get all the questions and you just need to ask them.
Yes.
You don't want to leave that room thinking, I should have done this, I should have asked about this, but I didn't want to be a burden, because that is certainly not the case.
True.
You want to do what's best for your kid. That is your time. You ask all the questions. And there's probably not a question that the pediatrician hasn't heard. So I think it's really important to bring it up. And oftentimes, if you don't, the pediatrician will also ask you at certain well visits, they'll bring out kind of a sheet to help you.
Oh, I remember those.
That. Yeah. Do you remember that? Where it's like, is your child doing this?
Yes.
Are they playing this? Are they stacking blocks? Kind of generic questions like
Yes.
that. But those are important questions to answer honestly, because they give the pediatrician a really good idea of where your child is developing.
Yes. So for parents who are listening, what are some of the most common speech and language problems that parents would look for when their kids are really little, like the most common speech problems that you recognize?
I can't pinpoint right away, but what I would say is that as a mother, and God has gifted us with this amazing blessing of knowing our children. And from the very get-go, when our babies are born, they're communicating with us. They're crying. They're telling us they're hungry. They're tired. They're uncomfortable. So we're getting communication right off the bat. So when you say very little, what do you actually mean?
True.
So communication is a spectrum all across those very infant times to toddler to young child to all across the board. So I would say as a mother, and what I noticed in my kids is I had such a intimate relationship with my baby that I knew when something was off.
Yes.
So you have to trust that intuition as a mother, as a father too.
Yes.
Fathers very much know their babies as well, just because they're not getting as much of that intense, maybe nursing or whatever during the day. Fathers know when something is off too. So also listen to that.
Yes.
So I would say when it comes to red flags, or what was your question in the beginning?
Yes.
Of knowing those signs.
Yes.
It's maybe that first gut
feeling.
instinct of this doesn't feel right. And it can be even like in a comparison to a sibling. Even if you're like, I had this baby already and this baby isn't doing the same thing. I think that's on purpose to kind of get questions going. And then your pediatrician might say, and as I would say, it's not always on this day that a baby or a child develops this way. It can be across a couple months or even a year for that child to get that skill of what another child got. So don't think, oh, they didn't do this at 3 months and so did. They're not on track.
Yes, that makes sense.
But it's also good to ask the questions, is my point.
Yes. So if you get that first feeling like, I think there may be something going on here, or they're not measuring up to their sibling, then don't hesitate, ask the pediatrician.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like you're saying also, if you leave the pediatrician, like this listener was saying they did, and you still have this unsettled feeling like, I think we need to do something more, then trust that feeling as well.
Absolutely. I think that pediatricians, for the most part, do an excellent job of screening and knowing what the red flags are, but sometimes they fall through the cracks. And there are sources. I mean, we have so many resources that we can check in on, even as simple as Googling developmental milestones. So if you just put that in the search, you can see a spectrum of developmental milestones of where each skill kind of comes into play. And this is not just speaking, right? Saying words, it's communication, eye contact. Are they playing alongside you? Are they babbling or, reaching out for things, pointing? All these things are communicative. When those things aren't happening and we're kind of getting nothing going on here, then those are red flags. But if they're on track with a lot of those things and maybe not one of those things, we're still on track, right?
Yes.
So I think just to as a mom too, I'm like, I always want to just check in. If I don't want to make an appointment with a pediatrician, right? I want to check in. It's a great source. Just Google developmental milestones and you'll get a pretty good idea.
Yes, we got to use our resources, right? And our free resources for sure. So
yeah.
You mentioned that communication with children is along the spectrum. So when they're babies, before they form words, they're making eye contact, they're responding to commands that you give them, um, by responding, like pick up that toy, and they'll actually pick the toy up.
Yep.
Throw the ball to me, and they'll throw you the ball, even though they're not making words. So that was a really good point to make, that you look for other cues beyond just saying words and forming words
Mm-hmm.
to indicate whether they are on track for this communication back and forth with parents or whoever they're interacting
That's
with.
right. Yep.
Yeah. And so then beyond that, with the words, like developing certain words, I know, I think remembering back to our first child, they're like, if he's walking by his first birthday, like you're on track. And
Right.
it was like the 13th or 14th month that he started walking, and I was thinking, "Oh, no, what's done? This is not good." But you're right, that there's a gray area where they're still on track because they're doing other things that line up with that.
Yep.
So, when it comes to talking, I mean, what is kind of the general rule of thumb that kids should be saying their first words
Mm-hmm.
by what age?
Typically, you start to see first words around 12 months,
Okay.
12 to 15 months, and it goes hand in hand with walking. Our physical development is a huge component in our language development. So as we start to get more out there, walking, crawling, exploring, then all of a sudden these words start to flow out.
Interesting.
Yes. It's part of our systems in order to kind of activate the motor, which speech is a motor act, if you think about it.
Okay.
We have to plan it all, and it's actually a motor act with our mouth and our tongue and our voice. And so when we're activating the physical components in our brain for movement, then we're going to activate speech as well.
I have 3 kids, and I never really made that connection.
It's so cool because I use it a lot in therapy too, of using physical play in order to activate speech. And it's a beautiful tool. Like just jumping on a trampoline, all of a sudden we get all these sounds and these words. Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay, this is making sense because my friends who have put their kids through speech therapy, they're like, they do all this play stuff, and they're wondering, like, why do they have to do that? Why can't they just do exercises of making them move their tongue in a certain way or saying the word over and over? Because, if we do that in 30 minutes time, that's going to be the most bang for our buck. But you're saying this is totally interconnected and you need play or the movement to activate the speech stuff.
Oh, totally. Speech is actually how we say the words, but language is what we're saying. So my job as a speech therapist isn't necessarily to teach exercises and strategies of how to say it. It's to teach them in context of what we're seeing and how to watch me say it so that you can say it correctly. Because if we're doing tongue exercises and things, there's not a lot of motor movement with our tongue to say an S or to say an L, or, and we're not going to break it down like that. What we're going to do is we're going to play, and I'm going to show you as I'm playing with this doll and I'm dressing the doll. I'm going to show you how my mouth is moving so that when you play with the doll, you're going to do the same stuff and pay attention to how your mouth is moving. So that's kind of the difference of speech exercises versus language therapy.
Got it. Because I don't have experience using a speech therapist for my kids. And so I just automatically assumed it would be a lot of saying the words that they can't say well over and over again, or doing certain, exercises. I know when kids have vision problems, they have to do these eye exercises where they're darting back and forth 30,000 times a day or whatever.
Oh man, I'm so glad my job isn't like that. If I was doing flashcards over and over, I would probably pick a different venue here.
Yes.
I mean, I would just be so, and honestly, I think the kid would be so bored.
Yes.
Right? I mean, when things are repetitive like that, we kind of check out. But when things mean something and they're functional, that's when they really set in and solidify. So that's part of the fun. I get to play with these kids.
Yes.
But also at the same time, there's very important strategies behind it.
Okay, so one of the things that I know parents look for in speech and language issues is like, can my kids say their R's? Do they have a lisp? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Are they, like you said, making eye contact with people? Are they looking down or looking away at something else? Are there other things besides just those main three that most people categorize as speech and language issues that you're like, people, you're missing this?
I know. It's so funny when people say, they hear that I'm a speech therapist, they always say, oh, my kid had an R problem, or my kid couldn't say S's. And I'm like, they don't even realize the broad spectrum of what I actually work with. And most of it is not even anything to do with what we call articulation.
Okay.
I mean, that's how we say the sounds. And a lot of times you will see those kids that have difficulty with sounds. But primarily when I do my work, which is an early intervention, that birth to 3 age group, you're not going to look for perfect L's and perfect R's. We're looking for kids who are able to ask for a snack or able to tell their mom why they're unhappy or what they need. Pretty much what kids need at that time is the most important part, because when we don't have those words, what happens? We melt down. We have behavior issues because we cannot communicate that to mom and dad.
Wow. Okay. So this is clicking for me. What I'm realizing is that I'm looking at a child and thinking, okay, I've got to look for these certain things. Can they say these words properly? And if they can, check, that's fine. If they can't, then we got to get them assessed. And what you're saying is, no, you got to look at like their behavior. Maybe they might be saying a word properly, but if they're having multiple meltdowns a day, tantrums, or there's a certain time of day or a certain activity like homework or reading that's aggravating this kind of response, then that could be part of a speech and language issue that needs further assessment.
Definitely. For older kids, when you say homework, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if that would come into play, but more times when in my earlier age group of just basic functional language, we are working with kids to be able to communicate their needs. So not even words necessarily. Sometimes I'm just teaching signs because our motor systems develop so much quicker than our language systems. So in order to tell mom, I want more of that snack or I'm going to have a meltdown, we simply put our hands together and say more. And we don't even have to say it with our mouth. That's communication. I'll start there because as soon as we get that cause and effect relationship with our parents of knowing if I do this, then I'll get this. That's the connection we need in order to get to words at all.
Yes.
So I don't even teach words at the beginning. I'm a lot of times just teaching sounds, signs, and that cause and effect.
Yes, that makes sense. So you're conditioning them to communicate in whatever way is most effective for them right then in order to get the outcome they want. And so that also encourages them and motivates them to kind of try the next step.
That's right.
Putting a word with it.
Some of the first things I tell parents is get that eye contact from your kids too. Because as soon as their eyes are engaged with your face, they're going to learn everything they need to know how to say those words. And if you even want to go a step further, you're pointing to your mouth. You're bringing toys up to your face. You're bringing a book that you're reading up to your face so that they can get that side by side. There's cow here and mama says cow. And we see how mom says it. And so that when I say that eye contact is such an important component to communication, that's one of the reasons.
Wow. Eye contact and just having that model of how your mouth moves when you're saying certain words.
Definitely.
That makes me think about the whole shutdown. Like everybody's wearing masks. The baby's wearing a mask, the parents wearing a mask, the teacher's wearing a mask. What effect did that have on your client population?
Sadly, Jordan, it went up 350%.
Wow.
A year later, speech and language services, 350%.
Oh my goodness. I would imagine there's people still waiting for services that are on this list because there's not enough therapists to meet these needs of the 350+% folks out there that are in need.
That's right. It's unfortunate what happened. we're climbing out of the hole. I had a very visceral reaction to the masks because during that time, of course, I'm teaching my families, show them your mouth, point to your mouth, watch how they say it. And then we cover up that availability of that tool. And all of a sudden we have all these kids in school with reading problems, spelling problems, articulation disorders, phonological issues. It's off the charts. I mean, not to mention anxiety and things that came with the masks. Yeah, that was a very sad time.
Wow. So if you are a parent listening and you had a baby during that time period that may be delayed because of not having that facial recognition and being able to pick up on those signs because of the masks and all of that, what is kind of the time frame? Like, can they do this like little turbo catch up period where they can rebound from that if they get services early?
I would say it's really on a case by case basis because every kid is different and you don't know what caused that. You're not necessarily sure. But I would just, if you have any concerns, get an assessment. There's some resources that I provided for you that you can check in if you're in Colorado or any state to get an evaluation. Free. I think it's free of charge in most states, but especially in Colorado, it would.
Well, that's a good recommendation. Is just that if you're concerned about that, or you say, "Oh, I had a kid during this kind of COVID period, and my pediatrician hasn't recommended anything," just err on the side of caution. Get an assessment if you feel like, that intuition is kicking in, and you may just want to find out where they are with their development.
Yeah.
And let's go on and talk about the importance of early intervention. And when we talk about early intervention, we're talking about kids age 0 to 3. Is that right?
That's right. I know 0 is a funny number with speech and language, right?
Yes, right. Because it's like, what are they saying at 0 right out of the womb?
Yes, but early intervention is not just speech therapist. It is physical therapists, occupational therapists, developmental interventionists, behavior therapists, so sleep trainers.
Oh, wow.
I mean, you get a lot with early intervention, and you can have them all at once if you need it.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
an amazing program.
I knew nothing about this. I've heard about early intervention programs and parents saying, we've used the speech component, we've used, the occupational therapy component, but you could really be getting all these services under this one umbrella of early intervention.
Yes.
If your child is in need.
Yes, and the state is providing it for free because of how effective early intervention is. Intervention before they get to a certain age is proactive. It's getting things in place before they start school is essentially what they're thinking. So you don't want to go down this line of things once they get habits developed. When kids are real little, they're like little sponges, as we know. So get them started early with the tools they need. And early intervention is really working with families. It's not just coming in and sitting with your kid while you go do the laundry. It's giving you tools as a parent, as siblings. Oftentimes I have a lot of siblings in the room that I'm teaching so that when they're playing with their little baby sister, they can do the strategies that I'm teaching them on a day-to-day because I'm there for an hour. That's not going to do anything. They're with them 24 hours a day. So give them the tools. And that's the beauty of the early intervention is to equip the family with the tools that they need.
Guys, did you know this resource was available? I mean, my oldest child is almost 18 and I didn't realize the breadth of services that are available state to state. And Erin's saying these intervention services are free to you if you get in before, is it their 3rd birthday or the 4th birthday?
3rd birthday.
The
day they turn 3, it cuts off, but it only in that funding piece.
Yes.
But as they turn 3, it doesn't necessarily stop for your services. What the beauty of it is that you get all these things in place, and then they turn 3, and the system helps you actually get into a preschool or a Head Start kind of program before then they get into kindergarten or 1st grade, so that if they really do have a delay that is progressing and not necessarily stopping, then it will help them through their school age years as well.
Okay, so you have a baby, you're worried about milestones, you're thinking, I'm not sure if they're meeting these. You get an assessment, and is the assessment through your pediatrician, or is it through a different agency outside of your pediatrician's office, that first initial assessment?
The first assessment is usually through early intervention program. It's called Child Find, and you can Google that as well. But I would send your listeners to that website, EI Colorado.
Okay.
EI standing for Early Intervention, colorado.org.
Yes.
And you can click on that, and it's real easy, real straightforward. It says make a referral, and right there is where you click, and I think you put your information in, and they will contact you. That's a free assessment through the state. It's an evaluation. You usually go to like a public school in your neighborhood. They will let you know exactly where you need to go, and a team of experts will evaluate your kid and usually get back to you fairly quickly with the results, whether or not you will qualify for the early intervention program.
Okay, so if you are listening and you're in Colorado, this is called Child Find, and it's eicolorado.org. And I know this has to be available in other states because this is funded through the government. It is something, like you said, the government is interested in helping you get ahead of these issues when your child is little, because it costs them a whole lot of money if they have to help you when you're 8 or you're 10 or you're 25, right? Because you're going to have to
undoing
undo a lot of patterns and habits and then fix something that takes a little bit longer. So have a child, you're worried, you go get an assessment by a team of professionals, and then they recommend which services your child is eligible for and could benefit from. So it could be like you, a speech and language development expert, pathologist, or occupational therapist or behavioral therapist. And then you come in and help the child where they are.
That's exactly right.
As a parent, I don't have to take my kid to a center and then sit and wait for an hour while they're in it, right?
And sometimes this is your baby. I mean,
Yes.
they're in diapers.
Right.
And you don't want to like pack up the diaper bag and go to a clinic. I mean, that's not what I would have wanted to do.
Right.
So I go into their homes. This is pretty much what happens for most therapists, but we do. We meet them where they are. And if the child is in daycare, I go to daycare. I haven't actually gone through any problems with any schools that are against an early intervention coming in. So that's set into place. I think everybody at this point kind of knows that's kind of the way it goes, and they invite you in.
Yes.
So wherever you are,
you can have your specialist come see your child in the school setting or in your personal home setting, wherever you are, so that you can teach the entire family these techniques, these strategies for engaging their child in ways that are going to help them day to day.
Yes. Well, I just came from a client this morning, and she said that she had signed up her little guy for one of those like Ninja Warrior courses, and that it occurred to her to call the early intervention place and ask if they would fund it, and they will.
What?
They will fund it because he needs physical stuff, so they'll fund it. And I said, well, I will just plan to come there as well, because I said before, the physical stuff helps with the speech and language. So if he's doing this physical thing in this center, I'm just going to go and do speech language therapy there.
Wow. So
yes,
Erin's going to be swinging from the rings and
that's right. The ropes.
That's right. Engage their clients where they are. She says, can we meet at the trampoline park? Because I really need to get my workout.
Oh, yeah.
While we're doing this. That would be awesome.
The 2-year-old on the treadmill. Yes.
Oh my, what a beautiful service. That I'm so glad that you're telling us about this, because it could be scary if you're beyond that 0 to 3-year-old age with your kids and you're recognizing now, oh no, we missed the window for free services. What do we do? So I'm assuming the same resources are available to families. Are they really expensive? Are there sliding scale, practitioners that can help? Does insurance cover some of this stuff if your kid is beyond 3 years old and needs speech services or occupational therapy services and that sort of thing?
Yes, I just want to reassure families that if you miss the boat, you're still able to cross the river. It's absolutely something that you can work out if you're motivated, right? If there's a will, there's a way.
Yes.
We're going to get across that river. So, yes, it's not perfect. You don't get the free program. What do we do now? Well, there's a lot of clinics that take insurance. I know all insurance plans are different, but this is a specialized service. So you have to check with your insurance and see if they would cover it. I personally do out of pocket pay, but I know that some of my families have gone and submitted the claims and gotten completely reimbursed for my out of pocket pay.
Wonderful. So
Right.
they would pay you in cash, write a check, put it on a card,
That's right.
and then you give them a receipt that indicates what services you provided, and then they can provide that to their insurance and work with the insurance on their own to get reimbursed for the percentage or whatever.
Yes.
I love that.
I know.
So many people don't know about that resource, that super bill, submitting the
That's
super
right.
bill.
And sometimes it's just a simple phone call to see of your coverage, because when you know the basics, right?
Yes.
If you want to get a screening or whatever for your own health, and those are covered, but you don't know about something as specific as speech therapy. So it's worth a call to make sure that this kind of thing is covered. And if not, then there's other ways to figure it out too. You can get there. I know that there's lots of options outside of just like a private practice or a clinical setting.
Yes, well, that's good news. And one of the things I'm always curious about is if you've missed services or you realize your kid's a freshman in high school and they're still having difficulty with some of these, or even like you notice them giving a speech or a talk about something and they're having trouble with the same kind of sorts of sounds or words or articulation. I mean, these things don't correct themselves on their own, right?
You're right. No, as we get older, they definitely become more habitual. It's not going to undo itself at that point. So, but I would say it's never too late. Never too late to get in there and ask for the help.
Yes.
I had a kiddo that missed that early intervention window. Her parents reached out very fearful. She had actually a quite severe phonological impairment where she couldn't say a lot of different sound combinations. She was talking like she made complete sense to herself.
Sure.
But we were like, oh boy, this is not making any sense. Some words were her parents could decipher because of context, right?
Right.
They were so used to her saying that word over and over at home. But when she got to school, she was in preschool. Her teacher was like, she's trying to tell me something all day. I have no idea. Well, the parent reached out to me. We started right away. I did intensive one-on-one, one day in the classroom, one day just one-on-one with her. And she was done. Goals met within a year.
Wow. So
Yeah.
she had kind of caught up, like we talked about before. She was one of those cases that with intervention, some in school, some one-on-one, she was able to get back on track.
That's right. I think any age too. You said high school, or if you're giving a speech as an adult. I mean, oftentimes you go back and you notice that and you're like, I want to change that.
Yes.
It's never too late.
Yes, I love that. I actually saw a post on social media where this gal was saying that her kids were tongue-tied. So they had the frenulum or what you talk
Good job.
is hooked to the tip of their tongue. I had two of them.
Okay.
And she was saying that her husband also had that. And so he got his frenulum clipped at the same time the little kids did. And he's like 40 years old.
You're kidding.
You know?
Wow, that's brave, because that gets pretty painful when you're older.
It can be. I guess he was motivated to change it. And so that's a message of hope, guys. It's never too late to, dive in and find out what's available for your kid. You've never missed the boat. You're never totally, without resources or help. And certainly if you're worried about paying for these services or that's an issue, ask around, ask the people in your parent community what they have tried and who they know that it takes sliding scale where they might accept a lower rate than the full, you know, $120 or whatever it is that they normally charge, because it's worth it. If it's important to you and it's important to your kids, then like Erin said, where there's a will, there's a way to make that happen. What are some other resources or thoughts that you have for parents, maybe that I forgot to mention or ask you about?
I think coming full circle of just trusting yourself as a parent, knowing that you know your kid best. Some of the things that will come up that you may see, and I see a lot in my professional world, is your child is understanding you 100% of the time. So understanding what we call in my scope receptive language, receiving information, understanding that, and following through with a direction, but not expressing their language, not saying any words. So if they're understanding language 100%, but not saying words yet, that's a red flag. So trust your gut when it comes to that, and call your pediatrician, look up your milestones. I don't know, get an assessment. I would also say a lot of times one of the first questions that I ask parents when I go in the home is, have they had a hearing screening or a hearing test? Because hearing has so much to do with speech, has so much to do with communication, frustration, behavior. If they're not hearing certain things, they're going to show it.
That makes perfect sense.
I like to say, rule that out right
Yes.
away. Oftentimes it is, but just get that hearing screening, get that hearing test.
That makes sense. They could have great hearing in one ear and not in the other. And so depending too on where you're standing or sitting and engaging with them, they may be able to respond or do what you're saying if you're over here, and then you might not catch that because we're moving on. We're on the go. We are busy parents.
So true.
Right? It's hard to observe these little nuances in your child, but also so important to just take some time and sit and observe when you're throwing a ball to them or you're giving them a command to open the cupboard door or something.
Yeah. And it can be as simple as in the car. Giving commands and seeing if they're responding, imitating. I know I'm so busy. A lot of things happen in the car. So testing, like, do you see that out the window? See if you get a response. Say an easy word as simple as like moo, or you see an animal, give that animal sound. See if they repeat after you. If they don't, chances are, and they understand everything, and they're not repeating, chances are they probably have some sort of delay and they need to get that looked at.
That is such great practical advice. Yeah, because you're right. We're always in the car going to the store or to school or wherever. And so we as parents can use that time when we're in transit to test these skills and then figure out if they're not responding to us in these ways. That's a cue. Let's make an appointment. Let's get an assessment. And guys, if you make an assessment or appointment, if you get your child assessed and they said everything's great, hooray.
That's right.
Right?
Yes, you can't lose.
That's right. There's no losing.
Such a sigh of relief after that. And even then, a sigh of relief if they do, because then you're on the right track.
Yes, you can get help because you got the assessment and now you have information to get services in place and get the outcome that you want. Awesome. I love it. Erin, this has been so helpful. I wish I would have known this like 18 years ago. But I'm so happy that our listeners are getting this information now. And you've given us a really good kind of spectrum. Like if you just have a brand new baby, here's some things to look for. Here's some practical ways to engage with them to find out yourself how you're feeling about their development. And then down the line, if you're thinking this doesn't seem to be going well, trust your gut. Even if your pediatrician doesn't think that you qualify for assessment or you need one, you can move beyond that and get one anyway.
Absolutely.
And then down the line, if they're into their teenage years or you're a 40-year-old man and you want to change something about your speech and language or the way your body moves or how you respond to things, it's never too late. There's always services available and practitioners that can meet you where you are.
Yes.
In order to help with the situation.
That's right.
I love it. Guys, make sure you check out the resources in our show notes. We've linked lots of helpful websites and services for you and your family. If you're not subscribed to our emails that we send out every Tuesday, please go to familiesofcharacter.com and sign up to receive those. This is where we'll send out resources from our podcast guests and freebies that you can download that help with these types of topics right in your home setting. So we're always happy to deliver expert advice and practical free resources for you to implement with your spouse and your kids. And we're just really grateful for Erin Honberrier. So we'll be sure that her information is also available to you. You could reach out if you want services. And we just hope that you know that we will forever be in your corner as moms and as parents. We just have your back, and we know that a community is the best way to get through this whole parenting and family life. So stay tuned, and we will catch you on another episode of the Families of Character show real soon.